All right, everyone. Now we have the swift boating of Tim Walz. Yes, indeed. He is being connected to John Kerry. You remember the swift boating ads back in 2004 when he was running? And the idea was that he got several Purple Hearts, I think 3 of them if I remember correctly, and one of them was for getting like a splinter on the side of a PT boat and stuff like that. Now at the time, it was off-putting to some people. And some people like myself said, well, it's not necessarily the biggest deal in the world, although John Kerry is a stolen valor individual. But it wasn't like the biggest of deals, so I don't know how effective this will be actually as a political strategy. I would say it's going to be more effective to liken Tim Walz to Bernie Sanders and say effectively, look, Kamala chose a communist as her running mate. I think that would be more effective. But it is still a little bit effective when you think about it. Tim Walz, to my knowledge, and again, I don't have the full details with regards to his military career. He had been upgraded to a master sergeant, a commanding master sergeant or something like that. But then he sort of, he didn't deploy when his men, his squad, were going to be sent over to Iraq. And so he got dropped down to, if I remember correctly, staff sergeant or something around that line. And then he sat it out, basically. He has been told that he abandoned his troops. That's basically the line that some of the people that worked with him are using. That's pretty damning at a time when your vice presidential opponent is a military veteran and has apparently a decent record. It is not going to be necessarily the best thing. When we're on a war footing in multiple theaters in the world, it's not necessarily going to be great for the public that you got demoted actually retroactively for effectively refusing to deploy and seeming like a coward in so doing. Now, I am not going to criticize Tim Walz for not wanting to deploy to Iraq. That's one criticism that some people make. I'm not going to make it. No reasonable person wants to deploy into war. It's not like Call of Duty. It's not star-spangled bullshit and happy and, oh my god, they gave me dextroamphetamine and I just liquidated 100 people. This is not Rambo. The reality of war is blood and guts and suffering and civilian injuries and landmines and trenches and crazy shit like that. It's not something to be celebrated. It's something that happens when people who are involved with diplomacy and government fuck up. That's when war happens. Or they decide that they want more money for their Raytheon stock and Boeing stock. It's not doing so well right now. Or something like that. I don't celebrate war. If I were the President of the United States, I would attempt to make the biggest, beefiest, most powerful goddamn military and civilian militia that you could possibly imagine in the world. It would be more powerful than anything that we've ever had before by 10 times over. But I would use it sparingly, if at all. I would try to keep the troops home. And I would personally taste test the MREs and make YouTube videos of that, actually. We're getting rid of the chicken chunks, boys, and we're bringing back the vegetarian lasagna. I don't know why these things haven't happened. You're fucking crazy. You're literally trying to torture some of your troops. I don't understand it. That's what I would do. Now, we don't need warmongering, and so I'm not going to criticize him for not wanting to deploy. Getting shot at is presumptively not a fun thing. It's probably not pleasant to get shot. I'm just putting that out there. So I don't blame him, and the Iraq War was unjustified ultimately. But you signed up, you became a command sergeant, you have men who are relying upon you, and you've got the experience. You've commanded them before. You've been in there for years. You are fairly decorated. You've done, at least on paper, you've done a reasonably good job. But when it came time that all of those men were going to get sent over to be shot at, you decided to pussy out. I will criticize that. If anything, Tim Walz rambling about his military decorations, which is funny since he's a communist, is almost stolen valor mode. So I can criticize that. No criticism for being averse to serving in war. I mean, if it's peacetime and you're like, well, I joined the Guard or something like that and got called up maybe, and it's like, or you're in like the Coast Guard, the Marines, whatever. It's peacetime, so, you don't have to go and shoot anyone. That's great. That's wonderful. We need our military in foreign theaters. We can't simply send the militia over to foreign theaters very readily. We could mobilize the militia at any time if we stop trying to disarm them, and then we'd have even more troops, like 100 million more. It'd be larger than the army of China by far. It would be very formidable. You'd probably need more transport craft, both in air and on sea, but you could make it work. That's what we should be doing. Big beefy military, use it sparingly, preferably don't use it at all. Try to engage other countries in meaningful diplomacy. Something the Biden administration has been, by the way, reluctant to do. Can I trust Tim Walz based on this decision-making? Should something happen to Kamala, so he becomes president of the United States, he's now commander-in-chief, can I trust him to be able to organize the military in a competent manner? I don't know that I can. I think that that's problematic. Now, if everything was hunky-dory, so it's 1992, you're not at war with anyone, well, maybe minor wars, but we get into those every other year anyway, but there's nothing major going on. You know, Soviet Union's on the shaky, and, you know, you're doing the diplomatic thing, I would say that would be fine. We're currently engaged in multiple proxy wars and rumors of proxy wars. We've got Israel v. Gaza. We've got Russia v. Ukraine. China is hungrily eyeing Taiwan. We've always got potential skirmishes between India and Pakistan. We've got the collapse of part of ECOWAS and the formation of an Eastern Bloc alliance in Western Africa. We've got Venezuela eyeing Guyana for Essequibo. We've got a lot of shit going on right now. Is this really the kind of leadership that we need? Or do we need Trump back, and preferably J.D. Vance, who at the very least didn't get demoted from Master Sergeant because he decided at the last minute, no, I'm not going to deploy into war. Again, it's not a decision that I necessarily have reprehension towards. I wouldn't want to deploy either. If I was in the National Guard and a war begins, and I'm like, shit, I've got two choices. I get demoted from this position that I've been given. I don't have to enter the command position. I just retire. Or I might get cycled back in, and they might continuously renew my service, which they were doing for a while due to lack of manpower, and keep me over there in the desert for 6 years or something like that. I would go with Tim Walz. Admittedly, I would make that same decision. I would say, go ahead and fucking demote me. That's perfectly fine. I'm not going to go and fight your fucking wars. Basically, I signed up for the college bonus. But that's because I'm being realistic. That's a human thing to do. But that's not what you want out of somebody who you want to lead the entire military, necessarily. Never been in the military myself, so I'm blameless on that one. Saying that, Tim Walz did act in a fashion in which, technically speaking, he abandoned the troops that were under his command. If I was at that role, I would have to scratch my head. I would say I don't want to abandon my men. You know, I'm qualified, military brass, thought I was. If I was just a grunt, though, yeah, I would retire before a war began or something like that. If I was in his position, maybe I would have gone. But I can't blame him. I've never had that experience before. On that token, can't blame him at all. But in the general sense, I mean, his own men are penning op-eds right now. There's a reason for that. They felt like they were abandoned by someone who they respected as a commander, and so now he's getting swift-boated. The idea is that, of course, he didn't really deserve the position anyway. I happen to agree with that. Sometimes, if you're politically connected, or you have the right ideology, especially in the DEI era, this is pre-DEI, so that doesn't really apply, you're going to get promoted a little bit quicker than somebody else who the commanding officer, who happens to be more of a politician than anything, sometimes happens to like. That's about all. Peace out.